Black box recordings contain sounds that aviation investigators recognize but never discuss publicly. These audio patterns appear across different accidents, different aircraft types, and different airlines. What investigators hear in those final moments reveals something about human psychology that the aviation industry prefers passengers never understand. This isn't about mechanical failures or pilot error. This is about the disturbing consistency of human behavior when death becomes inevitable, and why aviation authorities have created special protocols to keep these psychological revelations away from public scrutiny. The final 30 seconds of black box recordings tell a story that the aviation industry believes would fundamentally change how people think about flying, and they may be right. Aviation investigators who analyze cockpit voice recordings report hearing consistent psychological patterns across different accidents that suggest predictable human responses to imminent death. The recognition phase. In the final 30 seconds, pilots almost universally experience what investigators call recognition moment, the instant when they realize the situation cannot be recovered. This moment produces specific vocal patterns, breathing changes, and communication breakdowns that repeat across different accidents. Environmental audio signatures. Beyond human voices, black boxes capture aircraft system sounds, warning alarms, and structural audio that create acoustic fingerprints of different types of failures. Some of these patterns appear across multiple accidents in ways that suggest systemic issues. Communication breakdown patterns. The final moments reveal how human communication deteriorates under extreme stress. Investigators report consistent patterns of fragmented speech, repeated phrases, and psychological defense mechanisms that appear regardless of pilot experience or training. Aviation psychologists who study black box recordings have identified a predictable sequence of human responses in the final moments before impact. Stage 1. Technical focus. 30 to 20 seconds pilots maintain professional communication and follow emergency procedures. Voice stress analysis shows controlled responses despite rising physiological indicators. Stage 2. Reality recognition. 20 to 10 seconds, the moment when pilots realize all technical solutions have failed. Vocal patterns shift from procedural language to more emotional expressions. This stage produces the most consistent audio patterns across different accidents. Stage 3. Human response. 10 to 0 seconds, the final moments reveal pure human psychology stripped of professional training. These recordings capture humanity's most fundamental responses to mortality, which investigators consider too disturbing for public release. Aviation authorities have developed specific procedures for handling the psychological content of black box recordings that go beyond standard accident investigation protocols. Restricted access. Only specially trained investigators with psychological clearance can review the final 30 seconds of recordings. Standard investigators analyze technical data but are excluded from final moment audio analysis. Classification levels. The psychological content of black box recordings receives higher classification than technical failure data. Family members, airlines, and even safety organizations cannot access these final moments. Psychological support. Investigators who regularly analyze final moment recordings receive mandatory psychological counseling and are rotated out of the program after maximum exposure periods to prevent psychological damage. The aviation industry maintains systematic silence about the psychological patterns found in black box recordings because these revelations challenge fundamental assumptions about pilot training, passenger psychology, and aviation safety. Training implications. If the final moments reveal that training becomes irrelevant under extreme stress, it questions the entire foundation of pilot certification and emergency procedures. Passenger confidence. The industry believes that understanding how people actually behave when death becomes certain would destroy passenger confidence in aviation safety measures. Legal consequences. Airlines fear that detailed knowledge of final moment psychology could increase liability in accident litigation and change how courts assign responsibility. Beyond human psychology, Black box recordings capture technical audio that reveals patterns investigators don't discuss publicly. System warning cascades. The final 30 seconds often contain sequences of aircraft warning sounds that follow predictable patterns. These warning cascades suggest design flaws in how aircraft communicate emergencies to pilots. Structural audio signatures. Black boxes record the sounds of aircraft structural failure, which create acoustic patterns that repeat across similar accident types. These patterns reveal information about aircraft design vulnerabilities. Environmental sound analysis. Background audio in cockpit recordings contains information about weather, terrain, and external conditions that sometimes contradicts official accident reports. The most disturbing aspect of final moment recordings isn't the technical failures. It's the consistency of human psychological responses across different cultures, training backgrounds, and experience levels. Universal fear responses. Despite different languages, cultural backgrounds, and professional training, pilots exhibit remarkably similar psychological patterns when facing imminent death. Communication attempts. In the final moments, pilots often attempt to communicate with family members, make religious references, or express personal thoughts that reveal the breakdown of professional personas. Survival instinct patterns. The recordings capture pure survival instincts that override years of training, revealing how human psychology responds when civilization's veneer dissolves. Aviation investigators face a unique challenge. They must understand these psychological patterns to improve safety while protecting the public from information that could undermine confidence in aviation. Safety improvements. Understanding final moment psychology has led to improvements in cockpit design, emergency procedures, and pilot training. But these improvements are implemented without explaining their psychological basis. Information filtering. Accident reports present sanitized versions of final moments that focus on technical factors while omitting the human psychological reality. Professional burden. Investigators carry the psychological weight of understanding how people actually die in aviation accidents while being unable to share this knowledge with colleagues, families, or the public. The classification of final moment psychology creates an ethical dilemma between public safety and public knowledge. The right to know. Families of accident victims argue they have the right to understand exactly what happened to their loved ones in the final moments. The right to privacy. Others argue that final moment recordings represent private psychological experiences that should remain confidential even after death. Safety versus confidence. Aviation authorities must balance using psychological knowledge to improve safety while maintaining public confidence in air travel. The systematic classification of black box psychological content reflects broader questions about what the public should know about how people face mortality. Medical parallels. Similar debates exist in medicine about what families should know about final moments during terminal illness or surgical complications. Military applications. Combat psychology research faces similar challenges in balancing knowledge needed for training with information too disturbing for public release. Societal protection. The aviation industry's approach represents a form of societal protection from psychological truths that might be too disturbing for general knowledge. What aviation investigators know about human psychology in final moments remains one of the most closely guarded secrets in transportation safety. This knowledge influences aircraft design, training protocols, and safety procedures in ways that passengers never realize. Design influences. Cockpit layouts, warning systems, and emergency procedures are designed partly based on understanding how human psychology deteriorates under extreme stress. Training modifications. Pilot training programs incorporate lessons learned from final moment psychology without revealing the disturbing source of these insights. Regulatory changes. Safety regulations often reflect knowledge gained from psychological analysis of final moments, but the psychological basis for these rules remains classified. The black box recordings of aviation's final moments contain psychological truths about human nature that investigators believe would fundamentally change how society thinks about mortality, fear, and the limits of human control. These recordings represent some of humanity's most honest moments, when all pretense falls away and people face the reality of their own mortality. Aviation investigators who hear these final moments carry knowledge about human nature that most people never confront. The next time you hear about black box recordings being analyzed after an aviation accident, remember that investigators are learning far more than technical information. They're discovering truths about human psychology that the aviation industry has decided you're not ready to hear. The final 30 seconds of black box recordings don't just reveal how aircraft fail. They reveal how humans face the ultimate test of mortality. And perhaps the aviation industry is right to keep these psychological revelations classified, because some knowledge about human nature is too disturbing for a society that needs to keep flying.